Hello and welcome again. We're going to cover Chapter 11, which covers scene size up. The scene size up is something that's continually always ongoing. This is basically a thought process to yourself, your first steps before you're even making patient contact of everything that goes into it. So the elements of your scene size up are your BSI, your body substance isolation, making sure that you've got proper protective equipment to wear, gloves, eyewear, if you're in rescue situations, long pants, boots, rescue clothing. Also, just overall general scene safety. Is there violence? Do you suspect weapons? Do you need, law enforcement to make the scene safe? The mechanism of injury or the nature of illness. Basically, that means why they call 911 or what all is going on with this call. Are they sick? Are they hurt? How hurt or how sick are they? The additional resources necessary. This may mean that you need another ambulance crew, or you need a specialty resource such as fire departments, technical rescue, hazmat, air medical support, law enforcement, anything else you need besides yourself to be able to handle the calls you're responding to, and number of patients. So you can see how some of that all ties in together. Your number of patients could go into your additional resources. Notice you need another ambulance, or the number of patients going into scene safety and the additional resources with that. So it all kind of ties in together. So the very first part of everything is that BS man. So it's this BS stuff that gets a lot of people in trouble when they're going to a call. They forget of the basic elements. So your BS man consists of your initial scene size up. The only predictable thing about emergencies is that they are unpredictable. They're always ongoing, and what you think you're responding to isn't always actually what you show up to. So we'll talk about scene safety as it relates to a vehicle accident. So as you approach the collision scene, you're always going to be looking for other emergency vehicles responding, additional ambulances, fire apparatus, rescue apparatus, police apparatus. So a lot of this goes more into the vehicle driving we'll cover later, but you always need to be cognitive that there are other people responding to the same place you are, and it's good to know your area so that you know where they're coming from, who's going to be coming, and just listen to the radio communications. Always be looking for hazards as you're getting towards a scene, so checking the flow of traffic. If you're responding to a roadway and the wreck was headed in the opposite direction that you are, seeing how the traffic flow is going. If there is traffic flow, is the traffic still going? As you get there, whenever you get your apparatus parked, is the traffic still buzzing around you? Are there people outside of the vehicles, outside the scenes that you get up? The Good Samaritans doing the help me jumping jacks? Is there smoke or fire coming around it? Just always be looking in the direction where you're going. Don't just keep your face down, checking your Facebook status, but you got to keep your eyes up through the windshield to see if any kind of hazards lie ahead. Or, such thing as power outages. You're responding to a call at the middle of the night and say a car hit a telephone pole, and you see that there are no lights on any of the houses on your way there. It's going to be an indicator that you may be looking for lines down. So you always really got to be thinking outside the box when you're on your way there. Once you get within sight of the scene, be checking if there are more people standing around, any other kind of indicators you can see of something majorly hazardous. Be looking for victims. People have been ejected. There's numerous cases that have happened where apparatus are responding and they're not paying attention, and there were people thrown from the vehicle that rolled down the interstate and the apparatus ran over them. Most recently, a large plane crash in Los Angeles. Some responding apparatus ran over a couple patients laying on the ground that they weren't aware were going to be there. Just always continue looking for those hazards, more power lines, smoke, fire, anything like that can make your scene not safe and have for you to have to go back and request those additional resources you may need. Also, Be looking for those rubberneckers, that people who want to stop and take pictures, news reporters. The news reporters, they carry scanners in their vehicles, so sometimes they're there on the scene really quick trying to get pictures and video footage and whatnot. So you're not always having to be fearful of your patient, but of who could potentially be a patient if you're not being very careful. Also, just be following if there are any emergency personnel on scene already, such as the fire department or police. Just be cognizant of what they're requesting for you to do, where they maybe want you to respond or park. They may have already evaluated the scene and have a better idea of what's going on than you do. Once you reach a scene, whoever is the officer in charge, that's the person you need to relate to. But if you were the first person on scene, you're going to be the officer in charge. Even if you do not have rank, you're going to be in charge there until somebody else shows up that's going to take over. So such as the fire department showing up or police, you may end up relaying to them that they're going to be in charge of all the other communications and everything, so you can focus on patient care. But otherwise, if you show up on scene, fire department is there, police is there, somebody is already taking charge. They are the person in charge or officer in charge, and you just need to abide by what they say. And as always, put on your appropriate protective equipment. This may mean that yellow traffic vest, or putting on a helmet if you've got to get involved in a rescue situation, or basically just whatever the situation is you're getting into and whatever your department policies are. When you respond to vehicle accidents, you need to declare that area a danger zone. So you kind of basically need to have a safety buffer around everything. You don't want apparatus parked right up along the edge of the wreck. You want to be able to create that safety buffer around everything in case there's something else going on that you don't know of yet. So just kind of a good rule of thumb is at least 50% in all directions. So if it's two cars tangled up together, 50 feet in every direction for that safety buffer. Now if there's a fuel or a hazmat spill, that needs to get a little bit bigger. So rule of thumb there, at least 100 feet in all directions if there's a hazardous material. Otherwise, if there is something else more hazardous, you can refer to your ERG, Emergency Response Guidebook, and it'll give you the safe working distances as it relates to a chemical, if it's labeled on say a tanker or a commercial hauling truck or whatever. It'll give you the safe working distances, whether you should be downwind or upwind, and who can be where, but we'll cover more of that stuff when it gets to hazmat material, so don't get too fretted about that yet. But just knowing that in that danger zone, the more likely there is for other types of danger, such as fire, chemicals, high winds going into it, if there's wires down, a potential tree that could fall, or power poles that could fall. Just know that you need to spread out that safety buffer a little bit further. In relations of scene safety towards more of a medical call response other than a vehicle collision, thinking about the safety factors and that, other safety responding to residences and other areas or anything that could have violence involved with it, is to evaluate for what the threat of violence is. Always big indicators that if you hear loud noises, you show up on scene, you hear people in the house screaming, you probably don't want to go knock on the door and get in the middle of that. You declare that scene unsafe, let somebody else who has the abilities to make a scene safe, such as the law enforcement guy who carries a nightstick, a taser, a gun, let them be able to control that situation much better than you can with your oxygen bottle and your clipboard. If you see any weapons or drugs or alcohol, or just you have anything that gives you that gut instinct that something may not be right, or you may have gotten yourself into a bad environment, remove yourself from the situation and have somebody come take control of the scene for you. So think about this. Any call could potentially be hazardous, but what do you think is going to potentially have the highest threat for violence? Now, that's not always responding to the gunshot call, this and that. Some of the most violent calls I've went to is just between spousal verbal abuse. You get there and somebody called 911 and the other person didn't want you to. For example, the husband called 911 on the wife because she's drunk, and now she's mad at him because he called 911 and she had no idea. So there are crazy instances that violence can occur that are quite out of the norm of what you think of violence, of responding to that rape call or the shooting call, something like that. You can actually end up getting into quite a bit of violence for any type of call. So your standard precautions of your body substance isolation and PPE. So your body substance isolation goes into your gloves, your mask, your eyewear, things like that that just kind of protect your body. Other personal protective equipment would be if you say respond to some type of rescue and you have helmets, gloves, heavy kind of rescue outfits that you put on, heavy jackets and pants, heavier gloves and just those latex gloves you wear for bodily fluids, things like that. Just whatever's appropriate, you need to have on that. And most of the agencies that are policies and everything will deem what you have to wear and everything like that. But always be as safe as possible. So now that we've talked about BSI, scene safety, now we'll talk about the mechanism of injury or the nature of illnesses. So all of this really ties into the nature of the call. Why are you going to a call? What all is going on? So all that just kind of going through your head as you get the dispatch, thinking about the who, what, why, where, when, and how scenarios in your head, just trying to paint the picture of what you might be getting yourself into, just being mentally prepared on the way. So with mechanisms of injury, you're just thinking about what exactly happened. How did they get hurt? What body parts could have been involved? What kind of force was it? You're responding to a fall. Think, well, maybe how high of a fall was it? What could they have hit? Responding to a vehicle accident. So if you respond to a vehicle accident on the interstate, it could be a lot potentially different than responding to a vehicle accident that's in an alley. So you're kind of using that, getting that in the back of your head of possibly how bad the patient could be, or really just about what you're about to get yourself into. Also with that, we covered a lot of anatomy, and that is going to help you know with that mechanism of injury of what could be involved. So taking the patient who had a diving injury, knowing that they could have hurt their head or their neck, or a person who's in a vehicle accident and they were a driver and they got hit in the left side. So knowing that they took a lot of the force to their left side, or a person that got shot in the side, what organs it could have hit, just really thinking in depth of what could be affected on that person. So as you can see here, some indicators of thinking what could have happened to this person. Heavy vehicle damage, windshield issues, roof deformities, were they wearing their seatbelt, everything. Just kind of painting a picture and doing your CSI investigation of what injuries a patient could have sustained going into this, because that patient may be unresponsive and may not be able to tell you what exactly happened. So you got to kind of put on your detective hat and go to work. So in relation to motor vehicle collisions, with head-on collisions, you have what's considered an up and over injury pattern. If you look at the bottom left picture, it shows the up and over, to where you hit head-on and that body wants to go up and over the dash. So they're hitting the steering wheel, their face or head could hit the windshield. Most of those injuries are going to be upwards. You take the old lady who's in a seat or the young kid that likes to have a seat leaned way back and leaning in the car like a gangster, they could have the down and under injury patterns where they basically go down and under the dash, and you're looking at lower extremity stuff there, or hips, knees, things like that. You can see here indicators of his head-on collision. You see the airbags popped out, where the airbag could have busted the windshield. You see what's considered a spider webbing in this area right here. So this is generally caused from the airbag blown out, pushing this out. But if you were to see the same ring up here, higher on the windshield, that could be potentially caused by the patient's face. So just seeing those indicators of what could cause the injuries, or if on those airbags you would see any dried blood from noses, anything like that. So as I was talking about with the spider webbing effect, if you look, that looks just like a spider web. If people have hit their faces into the windshield, you see here there's no airbags laying out. Older vehicles that don't have airbags, if their face could have went into this, you'll see an outward movement of that glass. Now if you look in the vehicle and this glass is pushed towards the inside, that may mean that they hit a deer or something else to cause the glass to go in. So outside force pushed it in, inside force pushes it out, such as a face or another animate object in the vehicle, such as luggage, things like that. With rear end type collisions, you're looking at the neck injuries, or a lot of the instances you respond to, it's not necessarily their neck it hurts, but their paycheck. So, but in the good honest Samaritan patient, you're looking at those whiplash injuries, so the sudden stopping, going forward and backwards, so they could hit their head on the windshield, whiplash back, and then strike the back of their head on the seat belt, or if it's a not properly fitted seat, say in this picture here, if the back of the seat was lower, this person was really tall, you can have some major neck injuries of the head going forward and then backwards suddenly. Major rear end damage here. You could just imagine if somebody was in this back seat, what kind of injuries they could have. Side impact collisions, also known as a T-bone. I personally don't like to refer to them as a T-bone type accident just because I've never seen a New York strip or a prime rib or any other kind of steak accident, so generally good side impact collision covers it all. This is where most of that force is coming in the side, and talked about with knowing anatomy, knowing organs that could be affected on this side and how bad they could be hurt, and just the forces that go into the movement of the patient when they get hurt. So side impact, you're looking at head, neck, chest, abdomen, pelvis, thighs, almost potentially everything. Here's a good image of a side impact collision. You'll see here major deformity to the side of the vehicle with a lot of impingement. So just imagine if that driver's seat was there and everything got pressed in against them. So the metal's really going to be moving, the seats inside will move and flex with the car a little bit too, but all those safety areas that you have as the vehicle would be normally out here, so that space you have between your arms and your legs when you're normally driving down the road is gone, and it's basically direct metal forced up against you. So in an incident like this, basically the person in the driver's seat would have taken nearly the full force from the vehicle that hit them. And a rollover collision such as this, you're going to have all types of mechanisms of injuries from a lot of different forces exerted on the body. Just imagine the craziest amusement ride you've ever been on that goes and flips you and spins you. Just imagine doing that, but every time you move directions, you hit something or something hits you. Now, indicators in this accident of not being too bad is the fact that all the windows are still intact. There's no roof deformity, anything like that. And the glass here, it appears the glass was broken on the outside. So little shards of glass laying around out here shows that the glass was broken getting out, not from getting in. While you do your detective work and CSI skills at a vehicle collision, be looking about how the vehicles are positioned and what direction they were going, not where they're currently sitting. So they could have been hit, spun, and just be thinking about all the different directions that the forces could have been applied to where, it's head on, that up and over, down and under, just one direction of movement, but that person gets hit in the side, they're hit in the side and then they go into a spinning motion. So it's not basically just a single plane of forces or movement, it could be multi-directional. When you're investigating falls, some big factors go into how potentially bad the fall could be. So for an adult, a critical fall is anything over 20 feet. For pediatrics, anything more than 10 feet or 2 to 3 times the child's height. So you have that 2-year-old child that's barely over 2 feet tall. If they fall 10 feet, that's very, very bad on somebody who's only 2 feet tall. So take a look and do some investigations on this person who fell here. Just thinking about some other things that could cause their injury. Seeing this debris here, did they fall? Is there nails in these boards potentially? Is there other tools in his tool belt that could have possibly impaled him? Is there anything else over here he could have fallen on? Or how far did he fall? Was he up on this ledge of these little boards and fell that far? Or was he all the way up here on top of these boards approximately 20 feet in the air and then fell? Or did he just trip coming out of here? Or is it just a medical patient? So you got to do a little bit of CSI detective skills. More factors to consider when talking about falls is one of the most important things is how far did they fall? Next is what did they fall onto? Did they fall onto compact dirt? Did they fall into a large pile of leaves? Did they fall straight onto concrete? When they fell, did they hit anything else on the way down? Is there anything that interrupted that fall? So if they fell off the 3rd-story roof, did they catch another ledge or balcony on their way down? Or did they fall off a piece of scaffolding and they look like that look like a patient that fell through a plinko board just bouncing and bouncing and bouncing and bouncing? Did they basically fall and become a pinball, hitting everything on their way down? Just putting that detective work in and will help you analyze of how critical your patient can be. With penetrating trauma, anything that passes through the skin. That's a stabbing, a shooting, a person who fell onto something. If the guy in the previous picture had fallen on a nail, that's penetrating trauma. Anything that creates force that goes through the skin and other tissues is a penetrating trauma. Low velocity stuff, those are knife injuries. Those are pretty difficult to obtain because, for one, you need to know what kind of direction they were stabbed in. What were they stabbed with? What was the type of blade? Was it a long, very sharp samurai sword? Or was it just a little 2-inch pocket knife? Knowing what they were stabbed with, the type of blade and how long it was, and the angle it went through will help you know what type of organs it could have potentially affected. Medium velocity, that's a handgun, shotgun. Stuff definitely has killing force, but not as quite a high velocity as what a rifle would be. So think about the high velocity sniper rifles. Do quite a bit of damage, most generally always very lethal. There are people who have survived from rifle shots, but those are few and far between. So you think about West Virginia area, a lot of people have hunting rifles. These are rifles that kill large deer, bear. So to kill a person with one of those is very easy. The damage isn't always just from the projectile. There's a force called projectile force. The cavitation is the energy. So a bullet that may be only half an inch wide, as it goes in, it can spread out, kind of mushroom out, get a little bit bigger, but it's really the force of the energy that goes through that creates all the damage. So watch this video here on a cavitation effect of a bullet going through a gel. So you see the bullet that went through was very small. You see the ballooning and the spreading of those forces that create all that energy and that wave of damage going through. So that ballistics gel has about the same consistency as organs in the body. So you just imagine if that gunshot went into the abdomen, of how that could affect all the other surrounding organs. Granted, the bullet hole may be small, but the wave of energy that went through does greater damage. Now, blunt force trauma, think about somebody getting hit with a baseball bat. They're not always those signs or outwards of what happened, or somebody got punched in the head. So, thinking about big concussions in sports, that was players getting head injuries. But you look at them, they look fine, but internally you can't really see what's happened in the brain or the other organs, things like that. So a lot of times those signs aren't always as evident, so doing that good detective work and investigations will let you know more of the damage that goes into it than just basically what you're seeing. Then considering nature of illness. Why did the patient call 911? What's going on? Generally, the 911 centers can give you pretty good reports when they talk to the patient on the phone of what's going on, what their complaint is. But, the 911 centers can only do so much interpreting things over the phone. So it's just kind of going into knowing things. If they say a person's just not feeling well or they're having some difficulty in breathing, then they tell you that they've got a diabetic and cardiac history. That kind of changes the dynamics on things a little bit, knowing that there could be more that goes into this call than what you think. So as you get up to the scene, you're talking to the patient, also be thinking about stuff that went into it, thinking about other stuff that goes into the scene, using all your good spidey senses of maybe what's making the person sick. So you're going to get most of your information generally from the patient. If you can't get anything from the patient, from bystanders, family, healthcare workers, anything like that. Occasionally, you do have patients that you find that you don't know anything about them. There's nobody to tell you anything. You just found a guy unresponsive in an alley, and nobody knows anything about him, and that's when all the real fun begins. Number of patients. So we've talked about BSI, scene safety, mechanism of injury, or nature of illness. Now we'll talk about number of patients and all your resources. So how many patients are you going to? If they tell you you're in one ambulance, you respond, and then they finally tell you that your scene size up is that you're going to a 12-car wreck, that may be a good indicator to go ahead and ask to get more ambulances started that way, because you can't fit all the patients involved in 12 cars into your one little ambulance. And with that, do you have enough resources? Just hearing stuff over the radio, you may not know much, but say if they tell you you're responding to a car accident, the car's 300 feet over a hill, and you haven't heard them alert a fire department or a rescue team, may be a good indicator that you're probably going to have a hard time getting a patient 300 feet up a hill by yourself. So once again, on those size ups, knowing of specialized resources. Do you need a hazmat team, the fire department, technical rescues, law enforcement, anything? And more of that will become evident in the information you're relayed from your 911 call. And sometimes you don't even know until you get on scene exactly what you're going to need. So in closing, the basic elements of your scene size up. BS man, your BSI. Is the scene safe? Mechanism of injury or that nature of illness. Initial resources. Do you need any help? And there's number of patients. So this is all kind of stuff that's going through your head. In that BSI, you're responding to a car wreck. Okay, when I get there, I have to put on my traffic vest. If I need to get in the car, I need to put on a helmet and approved gloves. Is the scene safe? I get there, is the car into a telephone pole over the embankment, teetering on the edge of the bridge? Do I need to do that? Do I need a stage? Or you're responding to a victim who was found in the alleyway with apparent gunshot wounds. Probably not a safe scene. Making an injury, nature of illness. What was going on? Just the whole mental preparation of why that patient's calling you or what happened to them. And then additional resources and those number of patients. Do you have everything you need? How many patients are you going to possibly have to manage? So this is all just kind of your scene size up and mental preparation you need.